Hello! Can everybody hear me? I'm so sorry. I must have just mute myself. Can you guys hear me now? I think it should be fine. All right, let me just um, do the introduction once again. Welcome to the In a Nutshell with Almond show. This is a weekly update for you about Hong Kong news from Hong Kong with me, Almond Lee. Thank you so much for flagging. I'm so sorry. I was totally just in my zone and I totally forgot that I didn't have my mic on. But yeah, so today we want to talk about this National Day in Hong Kong, as well as not only about the celebration ceremonies that the top officials have, but also protest on by the pro-democracy activists and protesters in Hong Kong this week. So this week on October 1st, there's a national day happening in Hong Kong. It's also in China as well as in Macau. Basically all the Chinese territories. It's National Day, and before and on the day, Hong Kong government as well as Beijing officials here, they have launched these like grand ceremonies to celebrate and to mark this important day of our country. And I wanted to show you some video. Let me put this on. So what you're seeing here basically is the pre-National Day ceremony or celebrations. Let me just widen it down a little bit more. So this is a government video, and so this is our chief executive, Carrie Lam, of Hong Kong, chief executive of Hong Kong, and she's addressing a bunch of guests from Beijing. They have top officials as well as Hong Kong politicians, and so this is a pre-National Day ceremony. And at the ceremony, she took the chance to really highlight the importance of national security as well as nationalism and patriotism that Hong Kong should have, as we have been returned to China for more than 20 years already. And so at this ceremony, she also takes a chance to talk about, like I said, national security, especially after Hong Kong has the national security law implemented just a couple months ago. And she thanked Beijing for stepping in and helping the SAR to the HK SAR to quote unquote get back on the right track. And when she talked about this, she meant quelling the social unrest in the past year by introducing the new national security law, as well as the central government's help in keeping the pandemic outbreak under control in Hong Kong, including helping us to set up, the mass testing scheme, promising that they will help with, vaccines in the future and things like that. Um, and let me show you another video that is. So this is actually on October 1st, the official National Day in Hong Kong, and the tradition is that we'll have a flag raising ceremony, we'll play the national anthem, and then all the top officials, including of course Chief Executive Gary Lam, her family, we would have former leaders coming attending the ceremony as well. So that is the official like flag raising ceremony on National Day morning. As you can see, the officers are raising the flag right now. I turned the volume down, but that is the national anthem on the background playing. So that's Mark. There's a question from Mark. Do people approve of Carrie Lam at this point? Unfortunately, according to recent polls, no, her approval rate was still pretty low. So that's the public opinion poll that conducted by one of the Hong Kong's quite popular and famous organization. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining from St. Louis. Thank you so much, William. So yeah, back to the topic. The National Day ceremony and celebrations, people have been, I mean, the officials have been using that chance to really promote, or stress the importance of having nationalism, patriotism, especially what happened in the past year, with the protests and everything, and with a lot of, really, Hong Kong society has been in a very big division right now. We're kind of like polarized. A lot of people who either support the pro-democracy movement, they really want democracy, they really want universal suffrage and things like that. They want to choose their own leader and really have the autonomy that they were promised. But on the other hand, you have the pro-government or pro-establishment side or even pro-Beijing side saying, Hong Kong is never an independent place. We're not separated from China. We're part of China. So, the society is really, especially in terms of politics or political opinions, we're really polarized. But other than the ceremony, I also want to talk about protests happened on National Day. So police actually previously have already banned request to have a march or have a rally by some of the organizations in Hong Kong. They said because of COVID-19, it's still dangerous to have large gatherings and whatnot. The organizers of the march said that it's ridiculous because Hong Kong is we're resuming to a certain level of normalcy in terms of business operations, going back to schools, and government services. We're resuming all those ceremonies. Sorry, I was looking at the ceremonies. Resuming those operations, step by step, slowly, not of course like drastic change. Restaurants were now allowed to have more people, or restaurants would be allowed to open, or bars would be allowed to open to later in the night. So the organizers of the march said that it's ridiculous because if you talk about like avoiding large crowds, we are really not doing that because in terms of like our daily lives, he said that normal life could be get back to normal, but the only thing that cannot get back to normal is rallying or public assemblies. That's the only thing that can go back to normal, so to speak, or pre-pandemic level. But nonetheless, pro-democracy protesters still throng to the streets on National Day to go ahead with a rally, or at least a public assembly. And during that band rally, there are so yeah, they defied the ban and they still went out to protest. And one of the themes that they were having is that to release the 12 Hong Kongers detained on the mainland. They have been detained for more than a month now, and their family have said that they're still unable to contact them, and they don't know what is going on with them, and they are really worried, and especially because there have been reports that they were not able to get their own lawyers or the lawyers that their family have appointed for them. Instead, they're getting they claim that officials claim that they are choosing the defendants, the detainees. They chose government-appointed lawyers from a list that they were given. So it's quite worrying especially for the families, and also the pro-democracy camp here in Hong Kong. And so that's one of the themes, is to call for the release and the return of the 12 detained on the mainland. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining, Brian, Sunnyvale. And yes, so they still went out to protest, and police have arrested at least 80 people, including district councillors. That means politicians here in Hong Kong. It's kind of like a community leader. So police have arrested a bunch of them. Some of them for unlawful assembly, some of them for breaking the coronavirus restrictions, the public gathering ban, and whatnot. And so that's the National Day celebrations slash protests happened over the weekend. So as you can see that there's this photo of, I don't know if you can see that, I just did a screenshot. There's a bunch of really huge crowd of police, and they were arresting people for protesting and rallying on the National Day because they've already banned it, and they have talked about it previously, like prior to leading up to the protest or leading up to National Day. They said that we will take action. The police said they will take action and they will make arrests if you guys come out. So let me just check on some questions that we have from our audience. What do you think about Indian and China conflict? It's really, it's a different topic, really, and I'm really no expert in that. But of course, we've been covering this topic quite often as well because it's we're talking about like border conflict, and not. I'm not saying that we do have we do have some sort of border between China as well, but of course it's not like the conflict is not like China's and India's. Really, I really have to go back to the history and see, like what's going on. But definitely it's not a good thing because, so many soldiers as well as civilians died in the conflict. So obviously not a good thing. And Mark said it feels like China has been very successful in cracking down on the pro-democracy protest. Is that the way it feels in Hong Kong? In some sense, yes, I would say. And I remember reading so many. Articles and interviews of, people, for example, family or friends of those who have fled Hong Kong. And just on, random protests, and I would hear elderly saying that, they're really heartbroken because they have never thought that, some of them fled to Hong Kong years and decades ago to avoid, either war in their own country or on the mainland. They fled from wherever they come from to Hong Kong for safety, for better future. But now it's the other way around. Hong Kong youth, they are fleeing Hong Kong to go to other countries to seek asylum or to fear for their own safety in Hong Kong. These people told me, or in other interviews that they have done with other media, said that they have never imagined that one day people have to flee Hong Kong rather than people seeking security in Hong Kong. So that is really a huge part for them. And there's some other questions. Is the geopolitical position changing to the point of greater conflict between China and India? Probably not, I would say, because in Hong Kong, even though processes or the pro-democracy camp have been, vying for like greater autonomy in terms of like political, having our election rights and so on. At least the traditional pro-democracy activists or veteran politicians, they still recognize that in terms of in the aspect of diplomacy and army wise, they would still defer that to China. to Beijing. So they have the control if we're talking about like diplomacy. Hong Kong doesn't really have official like diplomatic ties with other countries. Um, so Beijing is still, in some sense, uh, holding control in terms of very big and national issues. So I don't think Hong Kong, if Donnie said, you know, elevate the conflict between Hong Kong and China would elevate to the level between China and India. So no, I don't think that would happen. At least not in any time soon. Um, so, and another question or the comment: Dem spread COVID-19 with Lunar New Year parades. They had no precaution. They had media smear the idea of travel restrictions. Well, I don't know about the H1N1 spread, but definitely, really, they have been. So the Democrats in Hong Kong, they've been calling for. Yes, it's true that they've been calling for a border closure and also tighter travel restrictions, especially between Hong Kong and mainland, because the first cases of coronavirus did appear in China. So they have voiced worries about that. Mark said, are people in Hong Kong aware that Trump has the coronavirus? And if so, what is the reaction to this news? I'm sure people are aware of that. It's quite a big deal. I haven't really read a lot of like reactions in terms of that. And yeah, so I mean, I guess it's not really a point of concern because it's not like everyone's eyes is really on the election, but it's not like Hong Kong protesters or the pro-democracy activists would, turn to Donald Trump right now to ask for any help, that kind of thing. Yeah, that's my belief. So people do pay attention to his health, obviously. Hi, Drew from Los Angeles. Thank you so much for joining. Brad, you heard Grandma Wong is back in Hong Kong. Yes, that's true. Thank you for bringing that up too. So that is according to local media who have been in contact with Grandma Wong. So for those who don't know, Grandma Wong was a pretty iconic figure in the anti-government protest in the past year. She has always carried this colonial era flag. So it's the Hong Kong flag, but under the colonial era, with a very small Union Jack at the corner. And so she has always been on the protest side, and she came from China, but she really she has stayed in Hong Kong and for quite some time. And a year ago, when she went back to Shenzhen, she was detained by mainland authorities. She was arrested, and she has been put under house arrest. That's believed what's happened to her, according to other local media who has been in contact with her. So local media reported that after a year of house arrest or under other sort of detainment, she has been sent back to. She has successfully returned to Hong Kong, and she has taken some medical inspections and treatment, and reportedly she's doing okay. So that's really for those who really pay attention to the pro-democracy movement in Hong Kong. Donnie is asking, where would you say the greatest support for pro-democracy outside of Hong Kong is coming from? I wouldn't say there's a huge chunk, but I mean, if you look at those previous anti-government protests in Hong Kong, a lot of international media cover that, and we do see a lot of different kind of like echoing protests echoing Hong Kong's movement in different parts of the world. The US, the UK, in Japan, in Korea, in Taiwan, of course, because they do think that Hong Kong and Taiwan is in quite a similar situation. So I wouldn't really come to a conclusion of, who is the biggest supporter of Hong Kong. And we do see, a familiar trend is more anti-government protest and more anti-government, movement or sentiment across the world. So it's hard to say. Right. So, Brad, do you get any sense from the protest movement that Biden would be more or less of supportive of the democracy movement than Trump? Um, and that is also one of the, I wouldn't say worries, but it's a factor, I would say, for sure, because it's true that Donald Trump has done quite a lot to, in terms of, for example, putting pressure on China, on Beijing, or even slapping sanctions on, Hong Kong or Chinese officials. Say if Joe Biden would be elected in November, would he still keep those sanctions or policies in place? We don't know. If he would add further of those policies or sanctions on China or Beijing, we don't know either. But it does seem to, it's really what Trump did was quite unprecedented. I would say that, in terms of keeping pressure on China and really challenge China in some sense. So for sure, I don't have an exact answer for that, but I would say that is certainly a factor, that would come into play, in terms of, and especially in we're talking about like international efficacy frontline for Hong Kong pro-democracy movement. But it really, like right now, I guess the focus is really still in Hong Kong, and it really, yeah. So I wouldn't say that Hong Kong would, hoping to get Donald Trump reelected again, or they would be, still be hopeful if Joe Biden gets elected, because international support is important. But I think pro-democracy activists here in Hong Kong, they do realize that it's really, the main game is really on the home turf. So that's my answer to that. And Donnie has a question. Is there serious nostalgia for past colonial rule, or is it mainly in response to mainland interference? I wouldn't. I mean, that's my own. That is just really my personal take. But I don't think there's a serious nostalgia for colonial rule or era or days. Because if you look at the past years' protests, a lot of those people, a lot of those young protesters, they were not even born in the colonial era. Many of them post 97 youngsters. Um, for sure, there'll be some people who have, BNO passports. They're born in the pre 1997 Hong Kong era, but still, if you look at, I mean, I was born before the 1997 handover, but I was only like a few years old back then, so I wouldn't really have a sense of, oh, how, whether that's good or bad, the colonial days. I wouldn't really have a sense. So I don't think when you use the word nostalgia, it's kind of like, oh, there's something good about it and we really miss it. Of course, I'm not going to dispute that a lot of the system, for example, the judicial system, that's one thing that the British has left Hong Kong, and it really makes Hong Kong a very uh, a very special place, and very we have this distinctive difference between Hong Kong's legal systems and mainland legal system, and that is why people do have a little bit more confidence in Hong Kong in terms of judicial independence, the robust legal system, and things like that. So I would say, but when it comes to pro-democracy activists feeling that Beijing is trying to have a tighter control, tighter grip on Hong Kong, then for sure I think it's understandable that why they're referring back to uh, the Brits, and saying that you guys have an obligation for us when you signed that joint declaration with China. And like I said, I think that is a tactic in terms of the international front line, that they're trying to get more allies and things like that. The pro-democracy camp that are trying to get more allies. So yeah. And other topic that it's also related to the protest would be people calling for the release or the return of 12 detainees that we just mentioned. I'm just going to show you the screen grab that I've taken. Oh no, it's not showing up. Let me see if I can do this. All right, that's better. I don't know if you guys can see that, but the little light bulb there, or the little bright sign in the picture. So this is a picture taken by the Stan News, which is a local media in Hong Kong, and this is their Facebook post. And what you see, little dark there, it's actually a mountain. It's called Lion Rock Mountain, or Lion Mountain, Mount Lion Rock. Basically, it's one of the tallest mountains in Hong Kong, and it's a very popular hiking place. And the hike would be gruesome, but this is also one of the quite unique protest point for Hong Kong pro-democracy processes. So over the past week, on that day, it was some pro-democracy activists. They hike up to the mountaintop and they put up this sign that said "Save 12." So they're calling other people to keep the attention, keep paying attention to the 12 detainees on the mainland, and really to keep the pressure on mainland authorities to return them to Hong Kong, so that if they've done anything wrong in Hong Kong or in mainland, they can still have fair trial in Hong Kong. So that is one of, like I said, it's also one of the theme of the National Day protests, is to calling for the release and the return of the 12 detainees. They've been there, they've been in custody for more than a month now, and they are not able to get their own lawyers, and their families were not able to contact them. So a lot of people are worried about that. Well, Donnie, yes, Donnie, a lot of questions from Donnie, but let me take a look. Do you believe that outside support for Hong Kong is falling flat to China, and therefore self-determination is the only serious solution? And then another question: any news about Uyghurs? Apologies, Uyghurs about Uyghurs. I mean, for sure there are news about Uyghurs, but are you talking about news in Hong Kong? It's not like yes, there are news about the Uyghurs, but I wouldn't say for in terms of local news, that would be sort of a lower priority in terms of local news, because there are a lot of protests in Hong Kong going on. So it's related, and also regional news. So they're definitely still in the news in Hong Kong. And going back to the support question, I mean, I'm not. Let me put it in this way. I don't think there is necessarily a correlation here between outside support and people calling for self-determination, because um, self-determination has been in the play um, of the pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong, even when there hasn't been a lot of like global media attention to this year's protest. I think that probably the idea or the concept of self-determination really blossomed in the past year or half year or so. But I think it's also, not having international support, it doesn't really mean that people would have to, call for or fight for self-determination. Because if you ask the pro-democracy movement, there's still a lot of spectrum to that. There are some people who just want, the basic autonomy and basic, freedom of speech that they used to enjoy before China tightened its grip on Hong Kong. Some people would go a little further and say, I want universal suffrage in Hong Kong. Some went even further and said, we should just be a separate entity. There are a lot of spectrum, and I think that it's not because of, for people who think that, Hong Kong should be a separate entity, they always have that concept, or they progress to that concept, but it's not quite related to having international support or not. And Brett said, are these 12 Chinese protesters or social movement leaders? We don't really have a lot of details about the 12 actually, but they're believed to be protesters at least, and they have been arrested, and they face charges of related to anti-government protests either in the past year or in in the past months. Some of them may have taken a little bit more like leadership role or kind of like a convener of some different groups. So yes. And yes, I hope I answer your question, Brad. Another update that I really want to talk about is it's really important because it's actually one of the reasons why